Well, today I have the extreme pleasure of talking with a fellow pediatrician, Dr. Damon Korb, and he is a developmental behavioral pediatrician, meaning that he works with children that have developmental concerns or behavioral issues. And I'll let him introduce himself, but he has written a book which I love called Raising an Organized Child. And when I saw the title of it, it spoke to me because for my own patients, oftentimes parents complain that their children are not organized. They can't follow through with instructions. They come home and they have a backpack full of stuff and they have no idea what they're supposed to do with it. And some of those things I have personally had around our dinner table. And so I'm super excited to get to talk with Dr. Korb. And I would love it if you could just start with introducing yourself and giving a little bit of background and context for what you do and why you wrote this book.
So I am a developmental behavioral pediatrician professionally, and I direct a center called the Center for Developing Minds here in California. But to give me more cred, if you will, I'm also a father of 5, and I've coached 20 to 30 seasons of youth sports. And,
oh, yeah.
And I babysat as a little kid, and my whole life has been set up around supporting children and helping their growth and development.
And as a father of 5, I'm sure that you witnessed many episodes of disorganization in your household. What inspired this book? Like, what inspired you to say, okay, I help all these patients, I coach sports, I have 5 kids at home, so I have plenty of people to experiment and practice on. What made you decide, okay, I'm ready to write a book and pick this specific topic and way of approaching the subject matter?
So I've been a developmental behavioral pediatrician for 20 years, and no matter what people walk in the door with, no matter what the concern is, whether it's oppositional behavior or it's anxiety or it's autism or ADHD or just my child won't listen, it all seems to boil down to executive functions. And so it seemed like I was saying the same thing over and over again about, learning how to plan, learning how to turn in my homework on time. When I finished my homework, did I remember to turn it in?
Right.
Where are my shoes? How come my child can't make friends? And all of those things are driven by executive functions. So what I tried to do is put together a book that could break this down into simple steps that parents could apply from infancy all the way through the teenage years. They have to be applied differently, of course, because every developmental stage has a different need or different demand. But I tried to make it as simple and basic as possible, because while parenting is really difficult, it is also we also can fall back on the basics, these basic principles, in order to be successful.
And for me, one of the things that really spoke to me was, I agree completely. Like, it can be very challenging, but at its basic, there's some basic, like, fundamental things about parenting that if you can get these and test all of the intricacies of parenting against those, then things usually go better. So could you share, I know that you have some principles that you lay out in the book, and if you could kind of walk my listeners and myself through what those principles are, then maybe we could talk about some specific examples after that.
So the book is called Raising an Organized Child, and it's published by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and it outlines 5 steps. And those 5 steps are: be consistent, introduce order, give everything a place, practice forward thinking, which is like anticipating, estimating, planning, and promote problem solving. And those 5 steps we can tweak a little bit as we go through each age or developmental level. But those 5 steps apply, I think, to all children.
And so be consistent. That's one that I often fall back on with parents who feel like, we tried this, we tried this, we tried this, we tried timeouts, we tried spanking, we tried all of these different things, and nothing seems to be working.
And the reality is they probably tried it twice and it didn't work, and then they gave up on it. Yeah. Exactly.
So when you say be consistent, what does that mean for the parent that's in the trenches right now, trying to, deal with a 2-year-old or 3-year-old that just won't listen? What does be consistent look like to you?
So let's back that up even further. When a baby's born, a baby cries, you pick the baby up. The baby's hungry, you feed the baby. The baby soils
Right.
himself, you change the diaper. And when you meet the child's needs consistently, it lowers cortisol level in the brain. So it reduces stress. Cortisol is the toxic stress hormone that's damaging to the brain, damaging to this prefrontal cortex that's important for the executive functions. And so just by being consistent and loving and nurturing for an infant, we're already setting them up to be more organized. As they get a little older, we introduce routines, bedtime routines. This is what we do before bedtime. And when we do these routines around bedtime, our children learn to fall asleep. We have routines around feeding. We have routines around going potty before we leave to go on a car ride. And the more we do these, the less we have to argue about them and fight about them, because the kids know this is just what we do. This is how we do these things. And so doing these things early makes it much easier as they get older. But consistency is also important for teenagers, right? The rule is we are not going to have our phones in our room after 10 o'clock. We park them in the kitchen. And we do that every time. And the more you start bending those rules, smart kids will say, well, you let me do this last time. How come I can't do it this time? And then you have an argument.
Right. And so if there's just consistency, as you said, which I really like that you start in infancy too, because I think people think that parenting starts, after they're walking, basically, like then you can start to, parent, and what that really means is like then you can start to discipline more. But parenting, I agree completely, is consistency is a huge part of that across the entire spectrum. And if kids know what to expect, then they know what the rules are, they know what their world looks like on a regular basis, and they can anticipate then, which is jumping ahead in your principles, then they know what to anticipate, and it's not such a surprise that we eat dinner after we play outside, before we read stories, and then we go to bed. Like that's just kind of the way that our family works. Yeah. And so when you work with a family that's struggling with consistency, what does that look like? What do you find is the most helpful way for them to become more consistent and to stop jumping from thing to thing?
So teenagers, I like to use the analogy of a roller coaster. When you sit down on the roller coaster, the very first thing you do is you pull that bar down and then you shake it. And you shake it because you want to make sure it's going to be there when you need it. And so what it looks like is the child pushing limits and shaking that roller coaster bar to make sure you're there. And you as a parent saying, remember what the rule is. Remember what the rule is. And not getting angry at them for shaking, because that's what kids are going to do. They want to make sure you're there. But to be as consistent with your message as possible. Now, life changes. And I recognize that you can't always be consistent. So, for example, we have a very good bedtime in our house. But on New Year's Eve, we let the kids stay up on New Year's Eve. But when I make an exception to the rule, what I do very consistently is I say, tonight is New Year's Eve. It happens once a year. We're going to stay up late. We're going to have ice cream sundaes, but we're only going to do this because it's New Year's Eve. So they really clearly understand. I've already cut off the argument that we can do it any night because we only do that on New Year's Eve.
That's a great point for tonight, which you might not be able to tell, those of you that aren't watching this live or listening live, that I'm kind of in costume as Michael Scott today with the tie and my hair up a little bit. And tonight is Halloween. So we're recording this on Halloween, which is exactly what I did this morning when I dropped the guys off, or our kids off at school, because we have 5 little ones as well. I said, okay, tonight, we can have hot cocoa after we come in from trick-or-treating because it's like 30 degrees out right now. But that's not what we're going to do tomorrow night, and it's not what we're going to do next week. And so you don't have to ask again next week if we're going to have hot chocolate. And they might ask next week, and then I'll just say, yeah, that was because it was Halloween. It was a special night. We were outside late, asking our neighbors for candy. That's not something we do every night. And so things are going to be a little bit different.
Right. Absolutely. Because exceptions happen, but you can handle exceptions in consistent ways.
How do you feel like a parent can get organized? If I'm a parent and I feel like I have so much going on and my schedule changes and the different demands on me change, it's going to be difficult for me, I would imagine, to be able to transmit that to my child, that organization is important. And so that might be something that parents are coming to the table with. Well, you want me to be organized, my child to be organized, to have an organized life, but myself as a parent struggle with organization, what are the first steps that you would recommend for a parent regarding being more organized themselves?
So I have so many things to say about this.
Yeah.
The first thing I say is the reason I wrote this book is I wanted to make it simple. I wanted to really boil down what organization means. And so that's, again, we're consistent. We introduce order. So schedules and routines, put those into your life. Give everything a place. Start labeling where things go. When I come home from school, the backpack goes here and the shoes go there and the lunchbox goes here. Practice forward thinking. So really be talking about each night before we go to bed, what's going to happen tomorrow? What's the plan going to look like? And promote problem solving. And this one we're going to get into, I'm sure, in a little bit, but this is the key to getting your kids ready to launch someday.
Right.
Is kids have to learn to figure this out on their own. Now, your question was about a disorganized parent, and certainly
right.
everything's harder, and I can empathize with it. What I would say is, first of all, I have rarely seen a parent that is disorganized in every way, meaning
sure.
some may have trouble with time management, but they're very good at keeping track of where things go. Or maybe they have trouble with both of those, but they're very good at seeing the big picture and stepping
right.
back and listening and solving problems. So as parents, even if we are disorganized, we can play to our strengths, and we can demonstrate for our kids that we recognize those other things are important and we're going to be working on those. Because just
sure.
the modeling that we value this is enough to get kids behind doing it themselves. And your kids may have different skill sets than you have. So
sure.
by you showing them that it's important, they may find how to do this automatically because that's just in their skill set.
I think that's a great point too, is that you don't have to be perfect at everything in order to have your child try and implement those things. You can say, I am kind of difficult, or I do have struggle with time management from time to time. And you are really good at that, Johnny. Maybe you can help me with time management, and I can help you to look at the big picture and problem solve, and being authentic and recognizing our own limitations rather than saying, well, I'm Superman and I can do everything.
And you can help me. How
that comes across
empowering.
more.
That's
my
so
gosh,
empowering
yeah.
for a kid to be able to say, you can help me with this. You're great at this.
Totally. My kids, when I'm like, I really need you to go, get socks from upstairs or something like that. Like even things like that, where it's something that they feel like they're needed and they feel like their opinion is valued and that they can bring something to the table rather than just being shepherding around and being told
How do I get my
do.
computer to work?
Exactly. That is a great one. That's a true one too. Like I can get my own socks, but sometimes I might not be able to figure out how to get your iPad to work right now.
Right. But the kids can do it.
That is a great point. Now, one thing that you touch on in the book that I really liked is boredom, and the use of boredom. And can you expand upon that a little bit, and what or how organization and boredom are related?
So parents are terrified of their kids being bored, and I'm not sure why.
I don't know why either.
It's a really valuable tool to have to solve the problem of boredom. Boredom is a universal problem that we all have. And good problem solvers can have a drop-down menu in their brain of, these are the things I wanted to do the other day, so maybe I can do them now. Disorganized kids don't do that. So a lot of times I'll have parents say to me, he's struggling at school because he's bored. He's just really smart but bored. And I'll say, gosh, you know what? My kids are really smart too, but when they finish their work, they wrote a play in their head, or they planned what they were going to do tonight. And so teaching kids how to solve problems on their own is valuable. What we are doing these days is if they have to wait 15 minutes at a restaurant, we're handing them a phone to solve their boredom for them, and they're not having to figure out what to do on their own. So it's great to put the kids in the backyard with a stick and a rock and let them make a game, let them create, let them solve that problem for themselves. That's teaching the skills that they're going to need as they become older and move towards adulthood.
I completely agree, and I think that that one of the things that I've seen with adults and with parents is that they're allergic to boredom for their children, and they're allergic to boredom themselves. So this comes out really darn quickly when we have to wait for the doctor's appointment or the elevator or something like that. We're instantly pulling on it, and I'm totally guilty of that too. I have shared with my audience before that sometimes when I'm walking from the first floor of our home to the second floor of our home, I'll pull out my phone and look at my notifications.
People pull it out on the toilet.
Yeah, totally.
Sit there for a minute.
Exactly. And so I think that is a really important take home point too is that boredom is okay. And you don't have to curate your child's every moment and say, I'm going to pick you up from school. You got ballet, you got piano, you got soccer, and then we're going to hop into bed and get your sleep in quickly so that you can get up in the morning because we got a whole load of things to do tomorrow. We'll just say, we're going home, and then, you'll go to bed at 7:30, try and entertain yourself while I make dinner, and then entertain yourself after dinner until we go to bed because I have stuff on my plate to do. And that's okay for parents. And I think parents have been told in a variety of different ways and mediums that you have to be on for your children and present at every moment. And if they're not learning their ABCs while you're cooking spaghetti and they're practicing piano, then you're letting them down as a parent, and that
right.
You
but
have
you're
to
actually
constantly curate.
depriving them of the opportunity to solve problems for themselves by doing that.
Oh, totally. Because then they're just like, well, somebody's going to cater to me, or my phone's going to cater to me when I have a moment of boredom so that I can escape that boredom. You touched on problem solving. Let's talk about problem solving and how to prepare your child at the different ages and stages to be an effective problem solver. Because obviously, as we go through toddlerhood, there's things that toddlers can't do, and there's things that teens should be able to do by then, but if we're doing them for them all the time, then they don't get that opportunity. So how do you teach a parent how to teach their child how to problem solve?
So let's talk about this first, just in terms of meltdowns and shutdowns. 2.5-year-olds and 4 to 4-year-olds, those are the terrible twos. It really goes to about 4.5.
Yep.
Those kids have meltdowns all the time. And the reason they have meltdowns is because they don't have the communication skills, and they also don't have the forward-thinking problem-solving skills that are necessary to solve problems. So we want to start building those skills even when they're preschoolers. And the way we do that is we kind of frame dilemmas. Wow, it sounds like you really want to watch TV right now, but you know what? It's not TV time, it's dinner time. And we lay the dilemmas out so they start thinking about what are the different options.
Right.
And by the time they're 5 or 6, they should start being able to do this on their own. And if they're still having tantrums at 5 and 6, it means they have a delay in their ability to solve problems.
Sure.
So we map out options for them, and then as they get a little older, we kind of think, well, what we help them, we navigate them through what are the options? What do you think you could do? What are other possibilities? So that they learn to solve problems. You can teach problem solvings when kids are little in many different ways. Books are a great example. Way better than television and video games. In television and video games, they're very linear. This happens, this happens, this happens, and I'm following. Right. But when I'm reading a book, I'm predicting. I wonder what's going to happen next. Gosh, what would I do if I was a wizard and I lived in a house with people who weren't wizards and they didn't respect me? How would I handle that? What if I was told I couldn't use magic in that situation? How would I handle that? That kind of problem solving that we're doing mentally is great exercise for the brain, because when they get to be teenagers, we want them to be able to solve a lot of problems on their own. If you're going to have a child in a car and somebody cuts them off, if they can't figure out the best way to deal with that situation, we're going to have trouble. So we have to learn to solve problems. When they have a coach in sports that they're not getting enough playing time, it's instinctive for a parent to go up to the coach and say, what's going on? How come my kid's not playing? Right. But what I would like a parent to do is to say, gosh, this is really unfortunate. How do you think you're going to solve that? I mean, do you really think you should be playing more? Why do you think you should be playing more? And kind of preview what that conversation is going to look like for them and say, why don't you go talk to the coach, figure out what it'll take to play more? Because the reality is playing more when you're in 3rd grade isn't nearly as important as being able to talk to a coach about a problem. That's a life skill that you carry with you all your life.
Oh, for sure. So you're talking, you taught them how to talk to their coach in 3rd grade, and then they can talk to their boss about how they're, feeling like they're not getting, enough new projects or something like that when they're 30. Right. And those are skills that translate, right? And their teacher, whomever they need to. So I see the flip side of that too, where parents jump to correct the teacher or correct the coach, and they kind of lawnmower over any issues for their child to clear that path. And it feels great to say, okay, well, my son got a B on this, but I talked to the teacher and it's been adjusted. And the self-confidence lost to the child and the lack of an opportunity to learn from that, I think that those things are just things that are going to only get worse as they get older and the stakes get higher.
I always hate to talk about the college cheating scandal, but it's a perfect example, right? This
Mm-hmm.
college cheating scandal, what message does it say to those kids? I don't really think you could get in. Mommy and dad are going to handle it for you. And
Right. And
even
it's,
more
I
important
feel
than the
bad. Mm-hmm.
legalities, the message that they've sent to their kids is really damaging.
Oh yeah, I've written about that previously, that specific issue too, where it's, I don't trust that you're good enough to get in, so I'm going to pay a bunch of money to make you think that you got in and really just take that ownership away from you. And I mean, the parents, might get a little jail time because they're a celebrity or whatnot, but those kids are going to have a lot more to unpack over the years, because that's what they were communicated to from their parents towards.
And the other thing I'd like to point out is the best way to teach problem solving is through real life stuff. Having
Mm-hmm.
kids pack for themselves when they go on vacation. Even second and third graders can start packing for themselves.
For sure.
Make their own lunches so that if we're running out of peanut butter, I better tell mom or dad that we're going to need more peanut butter because I won't have it for tomorrow. That kind of thinking ahead and problem solving that we let kids do through natural things that give them confidence that I can do this and my friends can't is really,
Mm-hmm.
really empowering, really important. Now, you can't just say to a first grader, okay, make your lunch. No, you want to
Right.
scaffold those options. Like you could have a little section of your refrigerator that they can pull from for their lunch.
Right.
Or when you're packing, you might make a list of all the things that they could bring and write down the numbers of each items, and then they can pull
Mm-hmm.
it. And then as they get older, they can write down the numbers of how many of each item that they might bring. And when they get older, they just pack by themselves.
That's something that I think is really helpful, is to scaffold it out, as you said, because as they get older, they'll be able to do more things on their own if we give them the tools to like make the right choices or make a choice when the right choice could be multiple different things, and giving them that freedom and flexibility as they grow so that they can see, well, I can make my own choices now that I'm a teenager, and these are the choices that I used to make. And so I get more responsibility and more opportunities to make more choices.
We went to my daughter's high school open house, and one of the teachers said, this was ninth grade, one of the teachers said, okay, every parent, you've all gone online and looked at your child's Power School or whatever the scheduling tool they use is.
Right.
And he said, is there any parents that haven't done that? And my wife and I raised our hands. And and she's like, you should do that. And we said, no, we don't do that.
Yeah.
That's my child's responsibility. It's their homework.
Totally.
It's their school. And
Oh
so
my
I want to
gosh.
empower my kids to be independent.
I think that's perfect advice, and I wish that more parents would feel comfortable with that, because sometimes we'll get those messages too, like, didn't you see that on ChildView? I don't have the login to that. Like,
Yeah,
I don't have the bandwidth to track my second graders spelling test grades and all those little tiny things that ChildView would give me. Like, I just want to make sure that they're not getting to the point where they're going to fail, and then everything else they can bring to me, they can show me, they can tell me that they had this problem, and I think I've given them the scaffolding and also the trust that they're going to bring it to my attention, or the teacher will. Like, the teacher will say, we're really falling behind in math. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Well, what should we do? Those are the opportunities, rather than, well, why did you get an 89 on your math homework, Timmy? You should have, what questions did you get wrong? I don't know. I mean, I just don't think that that's empowering to children.
Right. You're struggling. How are you going to solve the problem? What are the options? If that doesn't work, what are the next options? And it's okay to try a plan, even if you as a parent know that plan is not necessarily the best plan, but to let them try it, test it out for a couple weeks, assess whether it worked, and come up with a new plan. Because in life, that's what we do. The talented people struggle, solve it, or don't solve it. If they don't solve it, they try again, and they try again until they figure it out.
If you don't have the chance to pivot when you make a mistake, then all you're getting is these straight lines to the next thing.
Right.
You get out into the real world and realize that, well, somebody was kind of, lawn mowing down everything around me, so that I just walked from point A to point B, when really I should have had to go to C and D and F then to get back to B all those times. So that's such great advice. I think that this is such a useful book for parents. What do you think, like, when a parent finds your book, what are the typical issues that they're facing at that moment when they find your book?
Your question is, when parents find my book, what is it that they're looking for? What is it that they're hoping to have answered?
Right, exactly. So what's their struggle, and what are they hoping to get out of your book?
I think most parents originally come to my book because they think their house is messy. And the reality is this book is so much more than making everything neat. It includes strategies on how to do that, how to break down
Sure.
keeping things organized, but it's really teaching kids how to think organized,
Mm-hmm.
teaching them how to use their spatial skills to figure out where things go, teaching them how to recognize that there's an order, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to every task, teaching them how to plan ahead, to estimate, to think about another person's perspective, and to solve problems. That's what this book is about. So they may stumble upon it, not necessarily for the most important reason, but I'm glad they're there because I think it's really valuable for families.
That's so funny that you said that, because that is how when I first read the title of that, I was like, well, my kids already like clean up their room and put their stuff away decently. Like, they're organized enough. Their backpacks are a mess. But reading through it and cementing that it's really not just about the physical organization of stuff at all. As we've talked about, it's the mental organization and having frameworks and consistent routines and expectations, so that, like you put so nicely, I love that analogy of the roller coaster, where you test that, so that when parents see those testing, they recognize that as, okay, they're just seeing what the rules are, how strongly or how consistently I'm going to be with that. And so here's how I'm going to show them that they're safe, that they're buckled into the roller coaster, that as life comes up, they know what to expect and where things are going to go from there.
Right.
What do you think will change the landscape of parenting in the next 20 years? What's gonna change? I think we've gone from absent parents to lawnmower, helicopter, drone sort of parents. What's going to be the next thing, or what's parenting going to look like in 20 years?
I don't know if I can predict the future, but I can tell you what I hope. I think we are at a point where everything is being done for us. There's an app
Right.
for everything. And so
Right.
our need to think is going down and down and down. And I think it's going to hit a critical point where we have to swing back the other direction, where we have to recognize just what I'm saying, that kids need to become more independent. I had a family in my office whose son got into a very, very competitive college. Turns out he got into a very, very competitive college because the family really, really helped this guy organize through high school. And when he went to college, he couldn't set his alarm and get to class, and he was failing out of school. So the parents' response was to drive 120 miles on Tuesday, sleep in the guy's dorm room with him from Tuesday to Thursday so that they could get him to class Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then commute back.
Oh,
so their
goodness.
solution was to solve problems. I think we're at a point where the pendulum has to swing and kids have to become a little more independent again. That's my hope. That's where we're headed, and that's why I wrote this book.
Do you think that there's things that we as pediatricians could do to help encourage that at a more at the family level? I reading this book, implementing these things will help. What could we do as pediatricians or as child health advocates do to move the needle towards having more independence for children?
So I think the simplest and one of the most important things that a pediatrician can do, other than reading the book, is when my patients come into the office, I talk to them and I tell them what's going to happen. I'm telling them to their parents as well, but I'm talking to the child. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do first. This is when I'm going to talk to your parents. But I'm empowering the child. I'm showing that they can, at age 5, handle this appointment on their own. I'm setting the expectations. We're going to talk for 7 minutes during our talk. Don't play with any of the toys. When I start talking to your parents, then you're welcome to play with the toys. But I'm setting the expectation and I'm empowering the child. And I want to model that for parents so that they can recognize, wow, my child just sat there and had a conversation with an adult. That's important. And once we have conversations with parents, we talk about the 5 steps. Be consistent, introduce order, give everything a place, practice forward thinking, promote problem solving.
I think that's such a good framework for pediatricians to model, because what I try and teach parents in my office is you model what you want your child to do. If you don't want your child to play on their tablet and ask for their tablet all the time, don't model that it's okay to be on your phone,
Right.
24/7 at the drop of a ding.
It's a no phone zone in my office.
Right. And so if you can model those things as a pediatrician for the parents, and they can model it for their kids, and we can expand from there and share that with a broader audience and have more parents okay with allowing their child to be independent. I think that oftentimes I feel, and I don't know if you've read the Coddling of the American Mind, but that book talks about how things have changed so much in the landscape of children playing outside and playing independently and walking around their neighborhood without, the police being called that there's a child walking around the neighborhood unattended. Mm-hmm. And how society has changed so much. And so
absolutely.
I think parents need permission to give their children that opportunity for independent play and independent failure and adversity, and to allow them to experience life and be prepared in doing so for all the challenges that will come as they live their lives.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, it was such a pleasure to talk with you and talk through all of the different steps in your process and your book. Where else can my listeners find you and consume the information that you have to offer? Because I think it's going to be such a worthwhile time for any parent that's unsure of how to parent. They might not even be a parent yet, but they're thinking, okay, what am I going to look like as a parent? Or somebody that's deep in the trenches and is really struggling to figure out how to deal with the tantrums of the 3-year-old or the teenager that's vaping. Where can they find more information about you?
So our website is raisinganorganizedchild.com, raisinganorganizedchild.com. They can go to Twitter or Facebook. We're at Organized Child. And, and they can follow us. They can follow me on Twitter as well at Dr. Korb.
Awesome. Well, it was such a pleasure to talk with you, and I would love to talk again, because everything that you've said as a father of 5 to a father of 5, this is so resonated with me, and I'm excited to share your message with my audience in my office and on my podcast and Facebook page and everything like that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This was
Dr.
a treat.
Korb.
I appreciate what you're doing and getting the word out about parenting and pediatrics.